Hey everybody. Didn't expect to see you so soon. But it's 10 p.m. and I simply can't sleep. I have a severe case of insomnia. So, whatever, let's roll with it. I did mention that this could potentially turn into a mini series or a series on its own, right? So, why not start now? And what better way to start than from the beginning? I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and hopefully by the end of this series, things will have improved. But I'll need to have something to keep myself distracted with for a while. So let's begin. It all starts with, well, four people actually. My mother's side family is not really my real family. It all begins with my grandmother and her husband. And a pretty much aristocratic family that by the time I was born was already in decline. They were very powerful during the 20th century, from essentially the Renaissance of Mexico after World War II. My family had grown significantly in its, well, financial favor. And with the marriage of my grandmother and my grandfather, they ended up becoming quite powerful. A lot of influence throughout pretty much Mexico. But, well, that didn't last. My mother was adopted, much like my uncle was. They were both orphans and they were picked up by these two really powerful people. And my mother and my grandfather just never really got along. She was too free spirited and he was a businessman. So, from the get go, she just really didn't fit in with him. And he didn't really understand her. And really, my mother was given everything, and she just didn't take the chance to appreciate it. On my father's side, on the other hand, he was blood born from the union of my grandmother and my grandfather. They were a working class family. They didn't have the oligarch position of my mother's side family. All they had, they earned, and well, my mother and my father got to the same university in two completely different ways. My father worked his ass off. The eldest of three siblings, he was the one that just did the most. And through merit, he got into one of the most prestigious universities in Mexico. My mother, on the other hand, got in there because her father could afford it. And that's why they met. And, well, it was pretty much love at first sight. Unfortunately, that is not usually the kind of love that lasts. And being young adults that have very just recently learned of what they could do and just the possibility of essentially growing closer, they ended up being a little bit careless in the bedroom and they had a happy little accident which you are currently witnessing. I was an unwanted child. From the get-go, that was obvious. And since my father and my mother simply weren't in a position where they could really raise me, since, well, both of them were already kicked out of the house and they really just couldn't go anywhere, my mother decided it would be best that I was raised by my grandmother, who had a, a, an absolute palace of a house. It was huge, a mansion through and through. And that's where I would spend the majority of my childhood in. Essentially, a castle where I would grow up in and live in pretty much absolute luxury, at least for the first couple of years of my life. To the point that when my grandfather came to pick me up, so that I was introduced to my father's side family, I didn't immediately recognize that his car was not a luxury car. He was parked next to a neighbor's car, and I immediately went for it. When I realized the dingy Dodge from a couple decades prior was actually the car that he was driving, I was excessively embarrassed and I didn't know how to respond, but I was a kid. I had the expectations of the world set very clear with my family. But my father's side family did teach me plenty of values that I really do uphold to this day. But it was mostly my grandmother from my mother's side that really did a lot of the heavy lifting when it came to me showing appreciation for art. Something that, well, never really went away, and I might start doing again at some point. My more free spirited nature probably came from my mother's side. My more irrational nature probably came from my father's side. And that's how it was for a while. I lived in perfect comfort and luxury and in a stable family. But I was born with a type of autism that I'm not sure how many people know about, called Asperger's. It's not exactly like most autism types that people are familiar with. It is a very, very subtle form, almost functional, they call it. I haven't done much research into it because I frankly do not care. Because it really doesn't matter to me. Whatever I am, whatever I have, it's irrelevant. I prefer just embracing it as a part of me than having it be something that needs to be solved. This, however, led to a very difficult childhood. Not at home, but at school. I was always the black sheep. I never fit in, I was more creative than everyone else, more intelligent than everyone else, but excessively socially inept. I could not for the life of me understand social cues. And that's been a problem for my entire life, one that never really went away. And as it stood, I was really just outpacing everyone. I was doing better than everyone else, and I just didn't understand why I didn't fit in. It was probably envy, or it was probably, I don't know, the fact that I was just weird. But in retrospect, it's also the fact that I was a problem child. I had excessive anger issues, to the point that one of my earliest memories is actually getting sent to a principal's office because I'm pretty sure I cracked the skull open of a kid with a chair. And if I recall correctly, my mother did mention that that kid was the son of somebody that eventually became a politician. So it is quite the anecdote. One that I am not proud of, but I definitely remember. Needless to say, I was expelled. And I just spent my life like that for quite a while. A nomad. Between the fact that I was expelled from schools, graduated, and the school simply didn't have enough installations to support later grades, I just hopped from school to school, never really getting to know any friends, never really getting to keep any friends. For years on end, it would be a period of moving to a new house, getting to a new school, meeting a few kids, and leaving, never to see them again. And this was a perpetual cycle for quite a while. Eventually, we moved to the state I'm in, and I really just stayed here for a time. I met a few friends here. We became pretty good friends. I finally got the hang of social media, and I could finally get to keep a few friends for longer than a year. Unfortunately, I had the brilliant idea to leave. Three of my best friends, who's, just to give them names and not say their actual names, I'm just gonna call Neo, Odysseus, and Wesker. Neo was the eldest of the group. She was also the most knowledgeable of anime in the entire group. She was potentially a Tumblr user at the time, and I just didn't know because I never really knew all that much about social media up until later. Odysseus was just as creative and intelligent as me. He was my best friend for a long time. It's just a shame that we haven't really spoken for quite a while. And Wesker was the one that got me into video games. As you might assume because of the nickname that I gave him, he is a Resident Evil stan, particularly RE5. So one really got me into art, one matched my intellect, the other one got me into video games. So really, a lot of my personality developed a lot more thoroughly during junior high than it ever did in my early childhood. I was very stunted as a kid, and I just couldn't emotionally develop until far too late. And it was around this time that my parents divorced. We'll get into that later, and the relationship I have with my family in a later date, but perhaps knowing a little bit of my early life will help, at least for now, to help you understand just kind of who I am. And perhaps at a later date, you'll just get to really understand the kind of situation that I'm in. For now, I'll just leave this as a log in my diary. So take care, be kind to each other, and I'll see you on the other side. This is Webby, signing out.